Welcome to Mystery Stories 365. If all the water in the world disappeared today, every river, every lake, how long would human civilization survive? Maybe a few weeks, maybe just a few days. But there's one river that hasn't just given water to humans for the last 10,000 years, it gave birth to an entire civilization. A river without which the map of the world today would look completely different. There would be no pharaohs, no pyramids, and perhaps humans like us wouldn't even exist. Friends, today we're talking about the Nile River, the world's longest, oldest, and most mysterious river. The river on whose banks humans learned to write, learned mathematics, learned engineering, and it hid secrets so strange that even scientists today are stunned by them. In this video, we'll explore every side of the Nile you've probably never read about, its history, its mysteries, its power, and the danger that could threaten this river in the coming decades. So stay with us, because this journey takes us straight into the heart of Africa. There was a time when the world's greatest explorers and sharpest scientists exhausted themselves trying to answer one single question: where does the Nile actually begin? Greek philosophers thought it might flow down from heaven. Roman emperors sent expeditions just to find out. All of them failed. For centuries, the mystery stayed unsolved. The Nile stretches about 6,650 kilometers, flowing through 11 African countries: Burundi, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, Eritrea, Congo, South Sudan, and Egypt. It wasn't until the 19th century, when European explorers pushed deep into Africa, that they discovered the Nile actually has two main sources. The first is the White Nile, flowing out of Lake Victoria in Uganda, a lake so vast that early explorers mistook it for an ocean. The second is the Blue Nile, originating from Lake Tana in Ethiopia. Interestingly, it's the Blue Nile that carries 85% of the water in silt. Both rivers meet at Khartoum in Sudan to form the true Nile, which then flows north through Egypt and finally empties into the Mediterranean Sea. Thousands of kilometers of journey, thousands of years of story. The Greek historian Herodotus said, nearly 2,500 years ago, Egypt is the gift of the Nile, and that statement holds up perfectly. Over 95% of Egypt is desert. Without the Nile, all of Egypt would be an empty, lifeless wasteland. But the Nile brought life. Every year between June and September, heavy rains fell in Ethiopia, swelling the Blue Nile and flooding it into Egypt. As the waters receded, they left behind deep black fertile soil, what Egyptians called Kemet, the Black Land. Wheat, barley, and vegetables grew in this soil, feeding an entire civilization. Ancient Egyptians worshipped the Nile as a god. They even had a deity, Hapi, god of the Nile. Every year during the flood, people thanked Hapi with festivals, offering flowers, grain, and treasures to the river. Because they knew no Nile meant no harvest meant no food, and no food meant no nation. That's why the pharaohs called themselves guardians of the Nile. Their power came directly from it. And along that same river rose the great pyramids that still leave us amazed today. But the connection between the pyramids and the Nile went beyond just moving stone. Scientists believe the massive blocks used to build the pyramids were transported by boat along the river. Millions of tons of stone, thousands of kilometers, with no modern machinery at all. The Nile also taught the Egyptians how to track flood seasons using a calendar, how to measure land using mathematics, and how to build canals using engineering. One single river gave rise to an entire civilization. Friends, the Nile isn't just important to humans, it's home to millions of creatures, some of which make it genuinely dangerous and mysterious. First is the Nile crocodile, the world's second largest reptile, up to 6 meters long, weighing over 1,000 kilograms, and fast enough in water to outswim any human. Ancient Egyptians worshipped it too, through the god Soek, depicted with a crocodile's head as a symbol of strength and protection. Even today, the Nile crocodile kills hundreds of people across Africa every year, and is considered more dangerous than lions, with the strongest bite force of any animal on Earth. Then there's the hippopotamus, heavy and slow-looking, but actually Africa's most dangerous large land mammal. Hippos can move at 30 kilometers per hour in water, and when angered are known to flip boats entirely. And finally, the Nile perch, growing up to 2 meters long and 200 kilograms, so massive that first-time viewers struggle to believe it's real. Together, these creatures make the Nile's ecosystem one of the richest centers of biodiversity in all of Africa. Now let's get into the real mysteries, the ones that make the Nile the most enigmatic river on Earth. Mystery 1. The Nile flows backward. Most rivers in the world flow north to south. The Nile flows south to north instead, which is why it's sometimes called the backward river. The reason is elevation. Its source sits much higher than its mouth, so gravity naturally pulls it northward. Mystery 2. We still don't know exactly where it begins. Even in the 21st century, this remains unresolved. Most scientists point to the Nyungwe forest in Burundi as the most distant source, though others argue for rivers in Rwanda or Tanzania. In 2006, a British-New Zealand team claimed to have found the true source. In 2022, another team made a completely different claim. The debate is still open. Mystery 3. The Nile has completely dried up before. Ancient geological evidence shows that millions of years ago, the Nile vanished entirely, leaving behind a massive canyon. Scientists call this the Messinian salinity crisis, when the Mediterranean itself dried up and the Nile went with it, roughly 5.5 million years ago. Mystery 4. Just how deep does it go? Some sections of the Nile plunge 26 meters deep, roughly the height of an 8-story building. What lies at the bottom remains largely unexplored. Many archaeologists believe ancient Egyptian temples, statues, and treasures are still buried beneath the riverbed. In ancient times, the Nile wasn't just for drinking water and farming. It was a massive trade highway. Gold, ivory, spices, cloth, and grain moved along, connecting Egypt to Sudan, Ethiopia, and onward to Greece, Rome, and Asia. During the Roman Empire, the saying went, Egypt is the breadbasket of Rome. Rome's bread came from Egypt, and Egypt's bread came from the Nile. Even today, Cairo, one of the world's largest cities, sits on its banks, and over 100 million Egyptians depend entirely on its water. In the 19th century, as European powers carved up Africa, they seized Sudan and Egypt through control of the Nile. The British Empire viewed it as a gateway to India. When the Suez Canal opened in 1869 near the Nile Delta, global maritime trade shifted overnight, and Egypt became one of the most strategically important nations on Earth. In 1970, Egypt attempted something unprecedented, controlling the Nile itself, by building the Aswan High Dam, one of the largest dams in the world, standing 111 meters tall. The lake it created, Lake Nasser, stretches over 500 kilometers, making it one of the largest artificial lakes on Earth. The dam now generates 40% of Egypt's electricity, controls flooding, and supplies year-round irrigation. The Soviet Union helped build it as part of a Cold War-era alliance. But the dam brought serious consequences too. Ancient temples faced flooding. UNESCO carried out an extraordinary rescue, cutting the temples of Abu Simbel apart and relocating them 65 meters higher, an engineering feat in itself. The fertile black silt that once nourished Egypt's farmland now gets trapped behind the dam, forcing farmers to rely on chemical fertilizer. And without fresh silt reaching the coast, the Nile Delta is slowly sinking into the Mediterranean. It's a hard lesson. When humans interfere with nature, there's always a price. Here's something that might genuinely surprise you. The Nile could actually spark a war between 3 nations today. It centers on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD. Ethiopia began building this massive dam on the Blue Nile in 2011, Africa's largest, with a capacity of 6,450 megawatts, enough to power the entire country. For Ethiopia, it's a symbol of national progress. For Egypt, it's an existential threat. Egypt fears the dam will cut its water supply, and its population of 100 million simply cannot survive without the Nile. Egypt has even hinted at military action to stop it. Sudan, caught in the middle, is affected as well. All 3 nations have been negotiating under African Union mediation for years, with no resolution yet. It's arguably the world's most likely flashpoint for a future water war. Then there's climate change, which threatens the Nile's future in a different way. As temperatures rise across Africa and rainfall patterns become unpredictable, the glacial ice feeding Ethiopia's highlands will initially melt faster, causing more floods in the short term. But once that ice is gone, the Nile's flow will begin shrinking. The United Nations projects the Nile's flow could drop up to 50% by 2050, affecting over 300 million people across Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, devastating agriculture and triggering food shortages. The Nile Delta, home to 60% of Egypt's farmland, could sink under rising sea levels, and Alexandria, Egypt's second-largest city, sitting just 2 meters above sea level, could face partial submersion. The river that protected civilization for millennia may soon need protection itself. After all these heavy topics, let's take a moment to see the life that still flows along the Nile today. In Cairo, millions still stroll its banks each evening, dining on floating restaurants called felucas as music drifts across the water. In Sudan, camel markets line its shores, and the Nubian people continue centuries-old traditions controlling its edge. In Uganda, tourists flock to the White Nile for whitewater rafting, while in Ethiopia, the Blue Nile Falls, locally called Tis Isat, or Smoking Water, remains one of the most breathtaking natural sights on the continent. This everyday rhythm of life proves the Nile is just as vital today as it was thousands of years ago. Before we wrap up, here are a few facts about the Nile you've probably never heard. It carries over 90 million tons of sediment every year. Its delta is visible from space. Papyrus, the world's first paper, grew along its banks. Over 300 archaeological sites line its shores today. Lake Victoria, one of its sources, is larger in area than the Indian state of Haryana. Several European explorers who set out to find its source never returned. Sudan actually has more pyramids along the Nile than Egypt, over 200 of them. The name Nile comes from the Greek word Nilos, meaning river valley. An ancient Egyptian text describes the Nile as the breath of God. Ancient Nile emitters built to measure floods still stand today. The world's first known peace treaty, the Treaty of Carthage, was signed by a king along the Nile. So there you have it, the history, the mysteries, the creatures, and the looming threats facing one of the most powerful rivers on Earth. The Nile leaves us with a timeless lesson. Take from nature, but take care of it too. Because the day nature turns away, no civilization survives. The pharaohs knew thousands of years ago that nothing exists without the Nile. Maybe it's time we remember that too. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments which fact about the Nile surprised you the most. In our next video, we're heading somewhere else that'll completely change how you see the world. Until then, take care.